This table's for family only. I was 5 minutes late, just 5. I had stopped at Joe's Bakery on Elm Street, Grayson's favorite, for over 30 years. Chocolate mousse cake, 2 layers, hand-piped, happy birthday, Grayson, just like I always did. I even asked for the same gold ribbon they used in the 90s. The restaurant was on the top floor of some downtown hotel, private room, waiters in black vests, that artificial kind of laughter bouncing off glass and chandeliers, the kind you hear when people want to be seen happy. I walked in quietly, no one noticed at first. Then Grace looked up. She stood glass-raised smiling with that kind of smile that doesn't touch your eyes. "Sorry," she said loud and cheerful, "this table's for family only." She looked right at me when she said it, like I was the caterer who'd walked in uninvited. I froze, just for a second. Not shocked, just confirming what I already suspected. Julian didn't stand, didn't wave, didn't even meet my eyes. "Grayson." He smiled at something someone said, then raised his glass, but not to me. Nobody offered me a seat. A young waiter shuffled awkwardly beside me and whispered, "We've got a place for you right here, ma'am." He pulled out a chair small near the back wall, next to the drink station and the kitchen door. Staff traffic every 10 seconds. I didn't argue. I walked over, sat down, straight back, hands folded. I placed the cake gently on the small table, like it was a child I didn't want to wake. That same waiter came back with what looked like a menu. He said, "I think you dropped this in the hallway." But it wasn't a menu. It was a folded brochure, one of the glossy ones. Front page, Gracewood Interiors. Established 1987. Julian and Grace posing in front of handcrafted walnut cabinets. No mention of me, no Riley, no founded by, no designed by, nothing. Just them, as if I never existed. That was the moment it hit. This wasn't an oversight. This wasn't bad manners. It was erasure, intentional and clean. And the worst part, nobody flinched, not even Grayson. They didn't forget me. They had removed me. I didn't arrive late. I had already been written out. They didn't steal a business. They stole a legacy. I didn't say goodbye when I left the restaurant. I didn't make a scene. I walked out with the cake still in my hands. No one followed me. On the ride home, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just kept hearing Grace's voice on a loop. "This table's for family only," like I wasn't the woman who built the name they printed on the damn wine list. I wasn't born into wealth or business. I was a factory girl from Detroit. My hands knew how to clean sand and stain wood before I even graduated high school. I didn't go to college. My 3 sisters did. One became a teacher, one a nurse, and the other went into pharmaceuticals. I chose something else. I met Grayson Bennett at a local lumber yard. He was a mess, splinters in his palms, wood glue on his jeans, bad at numbers, but brilliant with his hands. We clicked instantly. He said he wanted to build things that lasted longer than a mortgage. I believed him. We started small, really small. Our first workshop was the garage of his late uncle's house. We fixed broken dressers, reupholstered torn chairs, and did custom builds for families who couldn't afford Pottery Barn. We lived off gas station coffee and frozen lasagna for months. Then came the winter of '87. The orders dried up. Grayson bought a bad shipment of maple veneer from a Canadian wholesaler, turned out to be full of warps and rot. That single deal nearly buried us in debt. I wasn't good with numbers either, but I knew style. I knew what customers leaned toward, what looked expensive but wasn't. So I stayed up for weeks sketching out a set of matching walnut furniture table bench, 2 chairs built with a clean Swiss aesthetic and not a single screw exposed, handcrafted joints, seamless finish. We called it the Riley set. Grayson looked at my drawing one night and said, "You sure?" I nodded. We built a prototype in 6 days. The first customer was a lawyer from Grand Rapids. He bought the whole set and tipped in cash. Within 3 months, we had 600 orders, no advertising, just word of mouth and a local write-up titled Rileywood Modern Heirlooms from Michigan. That name Rileywood came from me. Riley was my mother's maiden name. She used to tell me, if no one gives you a seat, bring your own damn chair. I built chairs, literally. We didn't talk about founders or credit back then. Grayson was the face, I was the backbone. That worked for us for a while. Julian grew up on sawdust floors. He used to nap in a makeshift crib we kept near the sanding station. He went to business school at my insistence. I told him, if you're going to run this thing someday, you better learn more than your dad and me combined. Then he brought Grace home. I remember that day like it was yesterday. She walked in like she already belonged, confident, polished MBA from Columbia. I liked her. I really did. She said all the right things. She told me, "You're the kind of woman I want to learn from." She wore red heels and shook my hand like a man. She made me feel seen, respected. On their wedding day, I gave her my mother-in-law's necklace, a quiet gesture, a kind of welcome into the bloodline. What I didn't know, what I couldn't know, was that Grace wasn't there to carry the torch. She was there to rename the fire. The shift didn't happen overnight. At first, she attended meetings quietly. She never challenged me directly. She smiled during every presentation I led. She brought coffee, offered compliments, asked questions. But then she started suggesting streamlining our branding. She hired an outside firm to modernize our visual identity. She convinced Julian to outsource production on 3 product lines, lines I personally designed and used to hand sign on the bottom of every chair. I didn't push back at first. I thought I was overreacting. Then the first logo draft came in. It read Gracewood Interiors, designed for tomorrow. I looked at Julian. He didn't say a word. That night, I found the old stencil we used to mark Rileywood products. I held it in my lap for an hour, tracing the curves with my thumb, like it was the only proof I had left that I existed. I didn't say anything about the new logo. Not right away. It showed up on invoices, email signatures, then the front window of our flagship showroom. One day, it was Rileywood. The next, it was Grace. Would no announcement, no transition plan, just done. I told myself to pick my battles. Maybe it was just Brandon, just a modern refresh. But inside, I knew better. I felt it. Still, I stayed quiet. The first real shift came during a Monday morning design meeting. We were discussing wood selection for the new artisan collection, My Concept. I had spent 2 months testing finishes for a mid-century inspired line built from reclaimed walnut. Classic sturdy, the kind of piece people pass down. I brought in the samples myself, laid them out on the table like I used to. The room was full product leads, interns Julie and Grace. I held up one of the darker walnut finishes and said, "This is the texture that'll give us character. It doesn't pretend, it feels lived in." Grace smiled, flipped open her laptop. "Beautiful, sure," she said. But according to the survey results, younger buyers are leaning toward Lightwood's birch ash. Reclaimed walnut skews older demographics, and it hikes up our material cost by nearly 30%. She clicked a few keys. A bar graph popped up on the screen. If we want this line to scale nationally, we need to think from a data-first mindset. We can't design for memory, we have to design for movement. People nodded. Nobody looked at me. No one asked what Riley thought. I set the sample back down. She didn't dismiss me. She bypassed me. That was worse. Later that week, I walked into our studio and found the blueprint wall replaced. The photos I hung there, the ones from our first workshop, the prototypes I'd sketched on printer paper were gone. In their place, a giant acrylic board with a new slogan, Gracewood Design That Leads. That was the first time I felt like a guest in my own damn building. Still, I gave her the benefit of the doubt. "She's thinking long-term," Julian said when I brought it up that night. "She's not trying to erase you." "Then why does it feel like I'm being edited out one piece at a time?" I asked. He didn't answer. Then came the staff newsletter. I used to write the opening column every quarter, a small note from the founder about where we were, what we were building, who we were becoming. This time it opened with a message from our executive director of creative vision, Grace. "I'm honored to continue the legacy of design that's always been a part of this company's DNA," she wrote. The words sounded right, but the signature was hers, just hers. I scrolled down. There were spotlights on new hires photos from the showroom, relaunch a Q&A about expanding into Europe. No mention of me, no founder's note, no quote, no name. I forwarded it to Julian. He replied 5 hours later, "Must have been a mix-up." "I'll ask Grace." He didn't follow up. That Friday, I dropped by the office after hours to pick up my old drafting tools. I used to keep them in the design room, same spot since 1994. When I opened the door, I saw they had cleared the wall I always used. The hooks were gone, the corkboard with my sketches gone. I stood there a long time. I didn't cry. I just felt cold. When I walked back down to the boardroom to grab my coat, the room was empty, lights dimmed, laptops closed, but Grace's laptop had been left on. A Zoom call was still active. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. She was mid-sentence talking to someone with a blurry face and a British accent. Yeah, no, she's still around a bit. But honestly, the company will do just fine once it's just me and Grayson. It's already happening. She's not part of the vision anymore. She laughed lightly. Don't worry, she won't fight it. She still thinks it's just a phase. I stepped back, heart pounding. I didn't make a sound. I didn't shut the laptop. I just turned and walked out. I drove home in silence. That night I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water and a yellow legal pad. I drew a line down the center. On one side, I wrote Grace's changes, and on the other, things I let slide. It filled up fast. Logos, color palettes, words in meetings, decisions not discussed with me, designers who no longer asked me to review layouts, emails that stopped coming, my name slipping off documents slowly like sand through a cracked jar. None of it was loud. None of it was direct. It was all subtle, strategic, careful. And now I knew why. She didn't want me to back off. She wanted me to vanish. I stopped going into the office every day. What was the point? My badge still worked, but my seat at the design table didn't exist anymore. People didn't look at me, they looked past me. One afternoon, I walked in to grab a folder from my old cabinet. A new junior designer was sitting at what used to be my desk. She looked up startled. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize someone still used this. Someone, not even you, just someone. I told her not to worry. I took the folder and left. That evening, I received an email. Subject line, workspace reassignments, from HR. Generic, cold, 2 paragraphs. To better reflect current roles and responsibilities, your previous office space has been reallocated. Please see the front desk if you require temporary hot desk access. I forwarded it to Julian. He didn't reply. I tried asking Grace. I knocked on her door and said I'd like to speak for 5 minutes. She didn't look up from her screen. Oh, Riley, I'm about to hop on a call. Can we circle back next week? That meeting never happened. That weekend, I got a phone call from a longtime vendor we'd worked with for over 2 decades. Hey, Riley, are you still involved in the custom line? Grace said all approvals go through her now. My chest tightened. I told him the truth. I haven't been part of approvals for a while. He paused. That's too bad. It doesn't feel the same without your touch. I thanked him and hung up. That night, I barely slept. Monday morning, I went into the showroom. I hadn't been in since the rebranding. The space was immaculate, sleek displays, digital kiosks, QR codes, everything shiny and disconnected from its roots. In the back corner, I found a piece I recognized instantly. It was part of the Riley set my original design from 1987. But the finish was wrong. The angle of the joint's off. It wasn't mine anymore. It was a replica stripped of soul. I crouched beside it, ran my fingers along the underside of the table. No signature, no marking. We used to hand carve RAB into every piece, nothing now. Just a little QR sticker, Gracewood Originals, designed by Grace Bennett. My knees buckled. I sat there next to that table for a full 10 minutes. No one approached me. No one asked if I was okay. I wasn't okay. Later that week, I received an invitation to the Heritage and Legacy exhibition in Chicago, a prestigious design show featuring iconic American furniture lines. Our company had submitted a collection. I hadn't been asked. Curious, I went to the show. The display was jaw-dropping handcrafted chairs, walnut tables, minimalist Scandinavian lines. My work, my exact blueprint. But the wall behind it read, Roots Legacy, designed by Grace Bennett. I stared. I counted every inch, every dowel, every slope. These were my measurements, even the small hairline curve at the base of the leg, a detail I created to reduce wobble. It was there. I stepped closer and found a line of visitors reading the plaque. A woman turned to her daughter. "She's amazing, this Grace Bennett. She really understands the American soul and craftsmanship." The little girl asked, "Did she invent these designs?" The mom nodded. She said she learned from her grandmother, but there's no record of who that was. I stood in silence, a stranger in front of my own life's work. I didn't speak, not because I was afraid, but because in that moment I realized something. It wasn't just erasure, it was theft, not just of a chair or a table, but of voice, of presence, of identity. When I got back home that night, I pulled out a box from the closet. Inside were old notebooks, my sketches, coffee-stained blueprints, even receipts with notes scribbled in the margins. On one page, I had drawn the original Riley set. At the bottom in pen, it said, "If no one gives you a seat, build your own." I stared at that sentence for a long time. The next morning, I went to HR to check my employment file. Just curiosity at first. But then I noticed something strange. There was a medical memo attached, dated 6 months earlier, signed by a doctor I didn't know. Diagnosis: early cognitive decline. Recommendation: voluntary withdrawal from decision-making roles. I stood there frozen. My hands went cold. "Where did this come from?" I asked. The clerk shrugged. "It's part of your file. We received this last year after a wellness appointment Grace scheduled for you." I didn't remember that document. I didn't remember any follow-up. I had signed some forms, yes, but not this. I demanded a copy, took it straight to Dr. Allen, my actual physician for over a decade. He looked at the paper, then at me. "Riley, I never signed this. This isn't my handwriting. That's not even my clinic's letterhead." And just like that, the floor fell out from under me. This wasn't just business politics. It was fraud. They hadn't just removed me from photos, they had removed me from the legal right to be present. I was officially categorized as incompetent without a hearing, without a diagnosis, without my knowledge. That was how they pushed through the trademark transfer. That's why my name no longer showed up on company records. I had been declared unfit on paper by people who didn't even have the courage to say it to my face. Grace hadn't just written me out. She'd buried me legally. I didn't scream. I didn't call Grace. I didn't march into the boardroom and flip a table. That wasn't my style. But make no mistake, something inside me cracked. They had declared me legally unfit to be part of my own life's work, and they'd done it with forged papers and polite smiles. The next morning, I opened a storage bin in my garage, one I hadn't touched in years. Inside were dusty binders, notebooks, receipts, photos, my entire design history, every order, every revision, every sketch I ever drew by hand. I spent the next 2 days cross-referencing old blueprints, purchase orders. The day Grayson and I signed our first LLC document in 1987, I found a napkin sketch dated March 14th, 1991, my handwriting signed R.A. Bennett, the original leg design for the Riley set. I needed more. So I called Olivia. She was a junior accountant we hired 3 years ago, sharp and quiet. She'd always been kind to me, always remembered my coffee order. "Can I ask you something off the record?" I said. "Did you ever see documents with my signature dated from last spring?" There was a pause on the line, then her voice dropped. "Yes, a set of authorizations around March. But you were in the hospital that week. I remember I covered payroll for you. I asked if she could send me a copy. An hour later, I got an email with 4 scanned PDFs. The signatures didn't match. They weren't even close. The loops were off, the spacing wrong. Someone had forged my name. Badly. I took them straight to Dr. Allen. He agreed to provide a notarized statement confirming the diagnosis was fraudulent. He added his full records showing I had no cognitive decline in over 10 years of visits. That was my second piece of hard evidence. The third came from someone I didn't expect. I received a voicemail from an unknown number. "Hi, Mrs. Bennett, this is Norman Fields. I used to work security at the old Rileywood office. I was there the day Grace took you to that doctor's visit. I I saw something I think you should know. I called him back immediately. He explained everything." That day, I had waited in the lobby while Grace argued with the receptionist. Norman, curious, had been testing a new security camera with audio. The device had accidentally recorded the conversation. He still had the file. He emailed it that night. In the recording, Grace's voice was clear. Just get her to sign the damn forms. She trusts me. The rest I'll handle with the doctor. Once we get this done, she's out. That was the third strike. 3 pieces of evidence, 3 nails in the coffin of their lie. I needed help. I thought about hiring one of those expensive corporate attorneys, but then I remembered someone else. Jaden Ross. I met Jaden 10 years ago when he was a sophomore in community college. His mother worked the front desk at our factory. He had dreams of law school, but no money. I wrote him a check for 2 semesters' tuition and never asked for anything back. I still had his thank you card. If I ever make it to the bar, I'll fight for people like you. Jaden Ross, 19 years old. Now he was 30, licensed in 2 states, specializing in elder law and corporate fraud. I sent him an email. He replied in under an hour, "I've been waiting to repay that check, Mrs. Bennett. Let's make this right." We met in his office. I laid everything out: documents, audio files, medical records, product catalogs with my designs signed under someone else's name. Jaden listened, took notes, then looked at me and said something I won't forget. "They didn't just take your company. They constructed a legal version of you that no longer exists, and that version can't fight back. But you can. We filed a formal complaint with the Department of Justice, fraud, forgery, elder abuse, corporate theft of intellectual property." Jaden called it a full-blown case of legal identity erasure. I didn't want a quiet settlement. I wanted the truth on record. Meanwhile, Grace kept posting, kept smiling. New showroom, new lines, new interviews about her journey as a female entrepreneur. She didn't know what was coming. Julian still hadn't contacted me. He hadn't even asked how I was, but I didn't need him to. What I was building was mine. While Jaden worked on the legal case, I turned my garage into a studio. Not fancy. Just clean wood hand tools and the smell of cedar. The way it used to be. I made 1 chair. Just one. A replica of the first I ever sold. On the underside, I carved R.A. Bennett, March 1987, still here. Then I photographed it, posted it to a small Instagram account. No hashtags, no promo, just one caption. "If they erase your name, carve it deeper." That chair sold in 3 days. I didn't wait for them to write my story. I wrote it myself. The morning after I left Grace's office, I called Jaden. He didn't even hesitate. "We go public," he said. But I didn't want just a press release. I wanted the truth to have a face. Mine. We sat down at my small workshop with a cheap DSLR and a tripod. No lights, no filters, no makeup. Just me sitting on the same chair they tried to erase from history. I looked straight into the lens. "My name is Ruth Ann Bennett. I am the original designer of the Riley set. You might know it, you might even own a piece. But what you probably don't know is that a few months ago, I was declared mentally unfit. On paper, behind my back." I paused, then added, "And that was a lie. I didn't cry, I didn't beg, I listed facts. I held up the psychological report I supposedly signed, except the signature wasn't mine. I held up the resignation letter they claimed I wrote, except I never touched it. I showed emails, contracts, designs, and a letter from the neurologist who confirmed I was perfectly sound. The video was 10 minutes long. Jaden uploaded it to YouTube at 7:53 a.m. By 11 a.m., it had over 1.2 million views. Reddit picked it up first. Furniture subs design forums. People began dissecting the timeline, comparing patents, pointing out inconsistencies in Riley Wood's brand history. By lunchtime, my name was trending on Twitter. By dinner, it was war. Bloggers called it elder fraud. Activists called it corporate gaslighting. A former intern even released an email from Grace dated 3 years back that read, "If we want to modernize the brand, we need to get rid of the grandma vibe." Others came forward too, former employees, woodworkers, even a client who had once asked for my signature and was told I was no longer alive. It wasn't just me anymore. It was a chorus. Jaden and I gathered everything, every email, every receipt, every forged file, and submitted a full case to the DOJ. We also handed it to the press. The New York Times called first, then NBC, and then came Forbes. Their headline, Ruth Ann Bennett, wasn't forgotten. She was erased. Grace stayed silent for a few days. Then she posted a soft-lit photo of herself in the studio with a caption, "We regret any miscommunication and are working to clarify internal matters. Ruth Bennett's legacy is important to us. Important, I was the damn foundation." That's when I decided to show up. The Craft Heritage Expo in Portland had an empty spot Riley Wood had canceled last minute. I took their booth. No flashy banners, no sales signs, just one chair. The original Riley, and a giant white oak board beside it. On it in black paint were the words, "Designs can be stolen, but dignity can't." I laid out pens and invited people to sign their names if they believed creators deserved credit. They came in droves, young artists, grandmothers, veterans, high school kids. One woman drove 2 hours just to say, "You made me believe I could build furniture too." I didn't speak much. I let the work speak until he showed up. Julian, he stood at the edge of the booth, eyes puffy, hair unkempt like he hadn't slept. I recognized the jacket. It was Edward's. My husband's. I didn't know, he said. I looked at him. "You didn't ask." He tried to step closer. "She told me you were tired, that you wanted to step down, that I gave up. I finished for him." He nodded. "You never checked." 37 emails, Julian. You replied to none." He looked down, shame tightening every line of his face. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I was weak. I didn't comfort him. I didn't touch his arm or say it was okay." I said, "Then don't be weak now. Tell the truth." And he did. The next day, Julian recorded a video of his own. He confirmed everything: the forged evaluations, the planned erasure, Grace's manipulations. That was the match. Retailers began canceling contracts with Riley Wood. Online marketplaces removed their listings. Investors demanded internal audits. Grace was suspended within a week. CNN ran the story under the title, "When the Founder Fights Back." Grace tried to call me. I let it ring. I was done with her words. Instead, I turned the camera back on. This time from a new space, an old warehouse I'd rented with the settlement money. I wasn't going back to Riley Wood. I was building something new, not for revenge, for legacy. I didn't expect to be invited to the board meeting. But when Riley Wood's legal counsel reached out asking for a clarifying conversation, I said yes on one condition: it would be recorded. Publicly. They hesitated. I didn't. No camera, no meeting. A day later, I walked into the same conference room where I once fought for the Riley set to exist. Now I wasn't asking permission. I was demanding recognition. Grace was there, of course, her makeup heavier than usual. Blazer, sharper voice like velvet stretched over wire. "Ruth," she smiled. "Glad you're here so we can resolve this with dignity." I sat down slowly. "Funny. That's exactly what you tried to take from me." The camera rolled. The room had 6 people: lawyers, board members, Julian and Grace. But all I saw was her. She crossed her legs. "You're angry, and I understand. But let's be honest, you did step away. You were exhausted." I pulled out a copy of the forged resignation letter. I never wrote this. And the signature, I tossed it across the table. "That's not mine." Grace didn't even flinch. "Ruth, you were having memory issues. I cut her off." "Lying isn't memory loss, Grace. You gaslit me, you staged a breakdown, and you stole my name out of the brand. That's not miscommunication. That's character assassination." Julian spoke up, quietly. "It's true, I believed her and I didn't check the documents. That's on me." One of the board members leaned forward. "Mrs. Bennett, what do you want from this meeting?" I turned to him. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "I want Grace removed, not suspended. Removed permanently. I want a public apology posted on every platform Riley Wood uses. I want my name reinstated as co-founder in all past and future product credits. And I want a formal letter sent to every major partner stating the truth." Silence. Grace scoffed. "You want to destroy me?" "No," I said calmly. "You did that to yourself. I just want my name back." She leaned forward now, her facade cracking. You think this makes you a hero, Ruth? You were a sidekick to your husband. You tagged along, I stood up. My husband built chairs, I built a legacy. He knew it. You knew it. That's why you needed to erase me. You were never creating anything new. You were just trying to sit in my seat. The room shifted, power shifted. One of the lawyers whispered something to Grace. She turned pale. Julian stood next. I moved for immediate removal of Grace Carlton as CEO due to breach of trust and fraudulent conduct. A board member nodded, seconded, and just like that, she was out. But that wasn't the moment that mattered most. The real moment came 2 days later in a town hall meeting live streamed to every Rileywood employee. I took the mic. For those of you who never knew me, I'm Ruth Ann Bennett. For those who did and stayed silent, I'm still Ruth Ann Bennett. And for those who chose truth over comfort, thank you. I walked them through the story. No melodrama, no sob story, just truth. From the forged documents to the betrayal to the battle. And then I said something I hadn't planned to. I forgive Julian. Not because he deserves it yet, but because I won't carry the bitterness he left me with. He cried in front of everyone. That night I went home and found a small envelope waiting at my doorstep. No name on it, just a folded paper with a photo. A photo from 20 years ago. Me and Edward sanding wood together in the original garage. On the back, a note. You started this with your hands. You defended it with your spine. No one can ever steal that again. It wasn't signed, but I knew. It was Jaden. Grace. She moved to Arizona or maybe Florida, somewhere warm where no one knew what she did. But the internet never forgets. Rileywood rebranded, new leadership, new mission. They asked me to return in an advisory role. I declined. I had my own name now, the Bennett Studio. We built small batch handcrafted sets. No mass production. Every piece had a tiny brass plate on the bottom, engraved with one line, built by the one they couldn't bury. I didn't need to win in court. I won in the eyes of every single woman who thought her age made her invisible, every craftsman who'd been replaced, every mother who built something and was told she didn't matter. You can't delete people, you can try, but some of us carve our names deep. 6 months later, I got an email from a college in Vermont. A young woman, a design student, had written a thesis on the invisible founders of American craft brands. My name was in the title. She asked if I'd be willing to speak at their symposium. I said yes. I walked into that auditorium and saw rows of young women, some with blue hair, some in overalls, some holding sketchbooks with calloused hands. They weren't here for a branding masterclass. They were here for something more powerful. A story, my story. I told them everything. How I was pushed out of my own creation, how I let silence become my prison for too long, and how I reclaimed my voice not by yelling but by building again, louder than ever. I ended with one line that caught in my throat. I was never just the wife of a founder. I was the reason it existed. They stood up, not out of pity, but in recognition, because they saw themselves in my fight. After the talk, one girl came up, maybe 19. She said, my mom gave up everything to raise us. She sews in the garage at night. I'm going to tell her your story. That's when I knew. I hadn't just taken back my name, I had passed it on. Grace never apologized, and I stopped waiting for it. Julian visits sometimes, not often. He brings coffee and helps out in the shop. We don't talk much about the past, but the guilt in his hands as he sands each piece that says enough. As for me, I'm not bitter. I'm busy. The Bennett Studio is fully booked for the next 2 years. Our sets are used in weddings, churches, therapy centers. Each time someone touches them, they touch something deeper, a truth that refused to stay buried. There's one final twist. A little girl came to the studio with her grandmother one afternoon. She saw a picture of me on the wall and asked, "Is that you?" I nodded. She smiled and said, "You look like someone who didn't let the mean people win." I bent down and whispered, "That's exactly right. So if you're watching this and thinking of the moment they erased you, the meeting you weren't invited to, the name they left off the plaque, the love you gave that never got returned, let me say this. You don't need a courtroom to validate your worth. You don't need permission to rewrite your chapter. You just need one thing, to stand up and say, that was me. I built that. I matter, Even if the world forgets your name, you carve it back in, right where it belongs. So if you were erased from your own story, would you stay silent or would you write yourself back in like I did? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If this story meant something to you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need it. I'll be back soon with more real stories like this. But for now, write your name back in, loud, clear, and proud. Thank you so much for watching.